Hey everybody, welcome back to the Nidus Anarchy series. I'm your host Adam, CIO and co-founder of Nidus, and today we're going to talk about something a little different. So everyone knows the game Sims. Well, imagine if they took Sims and every character in that game was actually controlled by an AI agent. Well, someone did it. So it's not exactly Sims, but that's just the idea of it, is they've built a virtual world with these 25 characters that are all interacting with each other and in a Sims-like manner. They're all their own individual personalities and they all have their own little homes and they have a little virtual world, as you can kind of see here. It looks almost like a Super Nintendo Zelda style game. And the idea is that these 25 different characters that are in this kind of simulation that they've put together they're all represented by an individual AI agent. And the AI agent is autonomous on its own in the sense that they're put into these worlds and then they're just interacting with each other. Now, what's crazy about this stuff is, first, it's two things. The first is this project was put out about a year ago, and by these kids in Stanford that are obviously super smart, and it's really awesome. And they open source their code, which is pretty rad too. So we're going to check into that in a second. But imagine this. Imagine if you had a Sims game and all your Sims are interacting with each other and they're all playing around doing their stuff, acting like how normal people would according to the LLMs. And then you as kind of like God mode, or you that controls a single player or injects, kind of a will of the people that you put onto them. That's kind of how this thing works. So in this simulation, each of these agents is controlled by a ChatGPT agent on the back end. And then what they do is they then kind of say, hey, you know what? This is what's happening right now. So as an example, they would say, hey, tomorrow is Valentine's Day. And then what would happen is they'd see how do all these AI agents or how do all these little people react when given this new directive. And nothing crazy, I shouldn't even say directive, but just new piece of information, if you will, because they're not being told to do anything, right? Now, what's crazy is when they put in this thing saying, hey, get ready for Valentine's Day, then all the agents started to behave like people would. They started going out, asking people on dates. They started going out and buying presents. They started sending invitations out and for parties. So they really started to behave kind of like human people. And this is pretty awesome. So the white paper that's out that goes into all the detail of this stuff it's online. We'll put the links below. But this is the details of it here. There's way too much to go through on this. I definitely encourage you to read it though. But I just want to kind of skim through and just show you some of the pieces. So this is the world of the little AI agents. So you can see that they run around this little kind of like Zelda-like world. So you can see down here, they have created a little village. So we have a co-living space, a bar, cafe, houses, college, grocery, pharmacy, supply store, park, houses, and a college dorm. Kind of like your own little village, all the little things that you would need to do stuff. Then within each thing, this is kind of what they're showing here, is there's areas within each building. So an example, in the house, you have a bathroom, a kitchen, common room, bedroom, garden, bookshelf, table. So all the little items that they would need. And they kind of watched them to see what they would do and how they interact with each other, which is pretty cool. So in here, you can see this would be one of the agents' routine. So right here, let's read what they have on the paper, right? A morning in the life of a generative agent, John Lynn. John wakes up around 6 a.m. and completes his morning routine, which includes brushing his teeth, taking a shower, and eating breakfast. He briefly catches up with his wife, May, and son, Eddie, before heading out to begin his workday. So you can see the timeline of this little character walking around the house and doing all the different little things, right? So here he's sleeping, he's waking up, then he goes, brushes his teeth, he takes a shower, makes himself some breakfast, talks with all the people. You can see the little chat bubbles saying that they're talking to people. He packs up his bags, and then from there he goes and starts his workday. Now, what's interesting, let's go to this part here. So this is on the next part. At the beginning of the simulation, one agent is initialized with an intent to organize a Valentine's Day party. Despite many possible points of failure in the ensuing chain of events, agents might not act on that intent, might forget to tell others, might not remember to show up. The Valentine's Day party does in fact occur with a number of agents gathering and interacting. So all they said was there's a Valentine's Day is coming up, and there's kind of let them free will. How do these agents react? And they reacted how people would react, which is pretty crazy. So let's talk about how these agents actually kind of did their communication. So they show the breakdown of Isabella in this example and how she reaches out to the other community members and how this party reacts. So it starts out here. Well, let's just read it from the caption. So the diffusion path for Isabella Rodriguez's Valentine's Day party invitation involved a total of 12 agents, aside from Isabella, who heard about the party at Hobbs Cafe at the end of the simulation. So Isabella, she mentions out to these 12 other agents saying, I'm planning a Valentine's Day party at Hobbs Cafe on February 14th from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Now, of these agents, 3 of them, we got Sam, Aisha, and Klaus, they all then reacted with other agents. So Sam reacted to Jennifer. Speaking of which, Isabella has invited us to a Valentine's Day party at Hobbs Cafe. Aisha talks to Maria. I'm organizing a reading night for the Valentine's Day party at Hobbs Cafe. You're welcome to join. And Klaus to Abigail, I'm actually planning on attending Isabel Rodriguez's Valentine's Day party as well, so maybe we could talk more then. Then Abigail actually reached out back to Isabella saying, I heard you're planning a Valentine's Day party at Hobbs Cafe. That sounds like a great event. These agents are acting pretty much exactly how real people would react, which is pretty crazy because they're not programmed to do anything. Like I said, these agents just have an initial prompt of basically giving them the persona of who they are, and then ChatGPT is providing the responses and feedback. This reminds me of when the Amazon Echo and the Google Home device or Nest or whatever the heck the thing is called, when someone would say, hey, my name is Siri or whatever, my name is Aunt Alexa, and tell Google, hey, my name is whatever. And it basically got them talking to each other by putting them into that loop. That's essentially what's happening here, right? So these agents wind up talking to each other and they're just reacting based on how these other agents react with them. But they're given a lot of area to work with in this little world, which creates an actual ecosystem, which is pretty crazy. So the first thing that I think of right away is obviously video games, because it's creating a video game like example, and they use Sims as kind of the launching pad of the idea of building this thing out. So video games makes a natural play into this. And we've talked about video games and AI generation for a long time already on a few different podcasts before, so we won't go into that part. But this gives you a whole new kind of look into how AI could affect video games, in the sense that instead of not only just AI generating frame by frame by frame of everything that you're seeing and reacting in real time, but every character that's in here being its own agent and its own kind of persona. In that case, they'll start really reacting really as people would. So you could, as you interact with people in the video game, the characters will react really how a real person would. Now, obviously, each agent would have a certain prompt, like, hey, you are a wizard and you can't do certain spells against fire or something, right? You give it like its limitations, boundaries, but also tell it who it is, and then kind of see how the game comes out. So really, this comes back to that whole thing about the future is going to be about prompt engineering, right? Because that's really what this thing comes down to. So not only did they put out this really awesome paper and have this, it was an amazing idea, and they did a great job, and there's tons of information here. It is so rad. But what they also did is they put out a GitHub repo with all this stuff open source of the simulation, so you can go and play it. And guess what I'm going to be doing over Thanksgiving break? I'm going to be trying to build and replicate this, because this is awesome. And I think there's a lot of possibilities with this, which I'm going to go into a little bit more in this next bit. But I'm not thinking video games, okay? Video games is very cool, and I think it's a great way to kind of simulate stuff, which is exactly what they're doing here in The Sims. But what I'm thinking this is going to go is something much scarier and much darker. Now, the paper that they just released just a couple days ago, I think it was on the 14th, really confirms the speculation that I have on this about how this else could be used. So let's talk about this other paper. So this is the new paper that they just put out, and it's entitled Generative Agent Simulations of 1,000 People. I'm just going to read the abstract to you, and then I'm going to pause for a second for your brain to think about this real hard about what the possibilities of this, and then I'll jump into my doomsday scenario. So, abstract: the promise of human behavioral simulation. General purpose computational agents that replicate human behavior across domains could enable broad applications in policymaking and social science. We present a novel agent architecture that simulates the attitudes and behaviors of 1,052 real individuals. applying large language models to qualitative interviews about their lives, then measuring how well these agents replicate the attitudes and behaviors of the individuals that they represent. The generative agents replicate participants' responses on the General Society survey 85% as accurately as participants replicate their own answers 2 weeks later, and perform comparably in predicting personality traits and outcomes in experimental replications. Our architecture reduces accuracy biases across racial and ideological groups compared to our agents' given demographic descriptions. This work provides a foundation for new tools that can help investigate individual and collective behavior. This is why it's terrifying. And this is where I saw this Sims thing kind of definitely going, right? So let's break this down. So the first part is we present a novel agent architecture that simulates the attitudes and behaviors of 1,052 real people. And the way that they did this is they interviewed real people for about 2 hours or so. Let me show you here. I actually have a little UI of the interface that they would give to people when they would do the interview. Is pretty cool. It's almost gamifying itself. So here, so this is the interface that they would give to people to basically get the persona out of a person's brain and put them into this little agent character that would then be them in this simulation. And they would ask them very broad, open-ended questions. And as you kind of figured, the LLM would be responding and asking them subsequent questions. So therefore, all the questions are dynamic and in feedback from the previous responses already given. So the idea is to get a holistic view of this person, who they are as a person, how they react, how they behave, everything that an AI agent would need to know to replicate on how to become that individual. So here's the main interface that they would show. So you can see it shows Isabella. Isabella's back. And what it would do is it would ask a question. So that's the interface there. And then the microphone icon would show up saying, hey, give us your answer. So as an example, Isabella's is probably the first question. To start, I would like to begin with a big question. Tell me the story of your life. Start from the beginning, from your childhood to education to family and relationships, blah, 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 blah. And then from there, you then give it a long form response. So imagine this. Imagine you're being interviewed by an AI Joe Rogan about your life story and who you are, and he really wants to know who you are. So long form, really get in depth about who you are. That information is then put into like a RAG-like vector database, right? So then therefore, these agents will always refer to that persona when it's making a decision of any kind. What they found out was crazy. So let's go back up to the top and kind of break this down, what they said from the abstract, right? So the generative agents replicate participants' responses on general social survey 85% as accurately as participants replicate their own answers 2 weeks later. So what they're saying is they'd watch how these little agents and sim characters, whatever, would be reacting to external stimulus or how they react to each other and what they would do in certain situations. Then what they would do is go and say, okay, Isabella, when asked to go on a date by this person who's like this, her response was this. Or when she got up in the morning, this is what she did in the morning. And what they did is they found all these different things that these individual agents did and how they kind of, the decisions that they made under certain circumstances. Then 2 weeks later, so after it's already done, they go back to the person that they copied the persona from and ask them, hey, if you were in a situation where, and then where that agent was in that situation, what would you do? How would you react? And the crazy thing is that that's where that 85% number comes into play. 85% of the time, the AI agent did exactly what the real person would do. That's crazy. And this is just for fun, experimenting, for science, right? Like imagine if there's a lot of money behind this. I bet we can get that number up a lot more than 85%. This is really cool and exciting because it's like, wow, you can really build characters, because if you do these long form, really, it makes sense, right? Like it's doing an interview, doing questions and answers, just transcribing it, taking that whole transcription, throwing it in, let's say, a RAG. And then therefore, every time the agent makes a decision, it goes, hey, I'm in this situation. How would this person respond based on all this external information, and then gives it the response. So it's not crazy complicated. It's a really awesome way to think about putting together a solution and doing. I think building the sim was probably the most complicated part. And then someone said, hey, I bet we can get real people in this. And then that's where they are. So now they're building the matrix. These little agents are in the matrix. To me, this is the first matrix. They're putting real people inside a simulation, and they don't know they're in a simulation. And when they're 85% accurate on how these little sim guys are reacting to the real people, This is crazy. This is super crazy. Okay, so let's go through some more of this fun stuff. These charts here are pretty cool. I'm gonna look at this top one here, generally this general social survey on accuracy, right? Because this is the one that's really crazy. So if we start here, the random baseline. So we're looking at around 22, 23% or so. It's that little purple dot down there. And what that's saying is the AI just randomly picks something to do. How often is that match up to what that person would do? And they're saying it matches up about 20 to 25% of the time. So not a lot. It's pretty much wrong the majority of the time. Now, persona based. So when only basing on just the persona of the person, how accurate is it? Well, now we're getting up into the high 50s. Add into demographic based. So when you add the demographic and the persona, still around the same, as you can tell. Now, when they throw in the interview based questions, now you're looking at like in around 70% accuracy. And then with the participants, the ones that are actually saying, hey, here's exactly what I would do in all these situations. You've interviewed me about everything. You know exactly who I am. You know everything about me. You know my demographic. You know all the details. You're getting about 85%. So the more information that they get about a person, the more real these things are behaving. Imagine if you took this, I don't want to segue too far because I could go down a whole nother rabbit hole, but imagine if you took this whole type of idea and you put this thing into a Tesla Optimus robot. Imagine if your Tesla Optimus, when you first open and you unbox it and it shows up, you know, the UPS guy drops that thing off and it walks up the stairs and knocks on the door and says, hey, I'm here. That'd be an awesome way to deliver itself. And so it shows up and it's like, hey, what's going on? And it's a blank slate. And the first thing it says is, hey, I need to talk to you. And it sits down and it has a nice 2-hour conversation with you. Now, all of a sudden, that Tesla Optimus will behave really very close to how you would in any situation in the environment that it's put in. So you can really teach the robot how to behave in every situation just by talking to it for only 2 hours in time. That's pretty crazy. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how they got the data out of people's heads. Like, what information were they asking these people to get this kind of persona and profile about the person to put into their avatar? So under the data collection procedures, more towards the bottom here, data collection took place on our custom-built platform where participants signed up with an ID and password of their choosing. Remember, we showed you that little screen, little gamification thing. This process was conducted in 2 phases. In the first phase, participants were informed about the study's goals, scholarly benefits, and potential risks, and provided informed consent. Once our participants provided consent to the study, they created a custom 2D sprite avatar using our avatar creator to visually represent themselves in the study platform. You create an avatar just like every other video game and you make it look just like you, right? As most people do, or at least who they want to be, I should probably say. Then they completed a 2-hour interview with our AI interviewer, followed by a series of surveys and experiments. The surveys and experiments were administered in the following order: the general social survey, the 44-item Big 5 inventory, 5 behavioral economic games, and 5 behavioral experiments. With the economic games and replication studies, the order of subcomponent studies was randomized for counterbalancing purposes. And similarly, for the BFI 44, which is the Big 5 inventory, the order of questions was randomized. The general social survey adhered to the sequence recommended by its documentation. Details of the surveys and experiments appear later. The second phase, participants joined a follow-up study 2 weeks after their first phase of participation. In this phase, participants completed the same surveys and experiments as in the first phase, except for the interview. This was done to account for any inconsistency in responses to surveys and experiments, allowing us to measure the internal consistencies of participants' responses over a 2-year period. So basically, they said, hey, we're going to ask you all these questions about yourself, and you're going to do the interview. Then they come back 2 weeks later and say, hey, we're going to ask you all the same questions again, all about yourself, and see kind of like as a baseline, like, are they still about the same? If not, you can kind of figure out a baseline between the 2 answers given up. 2 different answers to the same question, and that's how they created the baseline. Recruitment and demographics. We aimed to enroll a total of 1,000 participants who would complete all study components, including the second phase participation scheduled 2 weeks after the initial involvement. The sample size of 1,000 was determined to ensure that we could replicate the 5 behavioral experiments in our study with appropriate statistical power. Anticipating an attrition rate of approximately 20% for the retaking session, we recruited 1,300 participants for the first phase of the study, and they wound up with 1,052 people. So that's how they picked up their people, right? They go in here and show how they created the AI interview architecture. They basically, every time it would get an answer, it would just dump everything into like a JSON format and then store that and into the side. This is the interview script that we already kind of showed. And so if we go down a little bit farther, you'll see this supplementary tables. This part's pretty cool just for a quick visual to see kind of an overall view of all the people that they talk to. So you can get a feel of like, hey, how diverse is this crowd of people that they're talking to, or what similarities are there? So you can see they went through age, census division, education, race, ethnicity, sexuality, gender, income, neighborhood, political ideology, political party preference, all across the board. Now, I'm not surprised that they do this because a lot of these are like hot button type of topics that people are strongly opinionated on. So you'll probably get strong opinions about who they are. So that makes sense. But it wasn't just very binary either. So it looks like from 18 to over 75 years old, from all over, it looks like all over the East Coast generally. So we got New England, Mid-Atlantic, EN Central, WN Central, education, less than a high school graduate, all up to graduate degree, black, white, or other with regards to race, ethnicity, they're breaking it down, sexuality is heterosexual / straight, gay or lesbian, bisexual, asexual, pansexual, or other sexual orientation. So they broke it down into a few of them. So anyway, male and female is the only genders though, so that's interesting. Okay, so now let's just kind of recap to where we are. Some super smart people at Stanford created a cute little video game to replicate Sims, but each Sim having its own independent AI agent that reacts to their environment, and it seems to work out pretty impressively well. Then they got the idea of, hey, let's actually make each of these agents real people. So they interviewed a bunch of people for hours on end, 1,000 people, and figured out who they are as a person, and then injected all that data into each little individual avatar as an agent. So now they have all these people in the simulation world that are behaving just like how they were. Then they interview the people after all the Sims made all these decisions over this time, after 2 weeks, and said, hey, if you were in this situation, what would you have done? And 85% of the time, the people said they would have done the exact same thing the Sim did. Now, they didn't say, hey, the Sim did this. They just said, hey, if you're in this situation, what would you do? The response they gave was the exact same thing that the Sim did 2 weeks prior. That's crazy. So from a video game perspective, this is pretty cool because you're going to have crazy new types of video games out there taking advantage of this type of kind of new, I didn't say coding, but just this new development practice, right? Okay, now let's go down the scary rabbit hole. They interviewed people for 2 hours, and you're thinking, wow, I got to sit here for 2 hours and talk to a robot or a computer and play this thing to learn myself. That's going to be annoying. I'm not really worried about that. Okay. Does anyone have an Alexa or a Google Home or Nest or any of those things that are just constantly listening to you, Siri, all those fun things? I'm pretty sure that if any of these devices have a historical record of what they've been listening to, they have way more than 2 hours of information on you. Way more. And if you're someone with a lot of money or a lot of reach, like let's say you're foreign state actor or a government that just has access to everything, or you're a super large company that just has access to everything because you're in everyone's home already, or you're even a smaller one like Wise and you just have video cameras everywhere, right? All this audio is being streamed. You have not hours of transcriptions about someone and who they are and how they behave, but you have days, months, years of audio and transcriptions of people and how they behave in real life situations, all kinds of situations that people wouldn't even think of. Now, if you take all that information and you pipe that into a RAG system and you throw it into a system like this, I bet you're going to have way more than 85% accuracy. You have way better accuracy. So what I'm saying is you could really recreate yourself, or someone else could recreate you, actually, is what's even more terrifying. And they would know how you would behave in any given situation. Think of it like a more modern war games. Someone with enough power and resources and access to this information could recreate an entire situation. They could recreate you. They could recreate your home. They could recreate your subdivision, your community, your state, your country. I mean, depending on the amount of resources you have, and if you have billions of dollars and you got Musk level, like, I don't give a shit, I'm just going to do whatever I want type attitude, and you're kind of like on the nefarious side, you could really figure out what everyone is going to do and how they're going to react to anything before you ever do it. And I mean, like, okay, we're going to pass this new law. How is everyone in this country going to behave? We're going to pass this new regulation within our company. How is everyone going to behave? I'm going to post a new ad online. How is everyone going to behave? I want to target this specific individual because I need to build a spear phishing campaign to get out top secret credentials from them What's the best way that I can do it, and run through situations and simulations until you actually figure out a way to do it with the most success. It's endless. You could literally remake someone and know how they would behave before you even had a chance to be thrown into the situation to know how you would behave yourself. So this really makes me think about how we should really, two different things. One, be super careful about everything that's ever been recorded, which you can't really go back and do that now. Like places like Google and stuff, yeah, they'll let you delete their data. Might want to start doing that. But more importantly, I think the new thing is you're going to have to start AI poisoning yourself online, because all the times that you've ever gone online and talked to someone, every time you posted something on Instagram, even it's like, oh, but it's just a 20-second clip. But how many hundreds or thousands of those 20-second clips have been across various platforms that can all be correlated and aggregated through facial technology, through just realizing it's the same username? I mean, it's really not complicated to match all this stuff up and say, hey, this is this person, and here's all the audio transcriptions that they've ever done over time. So now I know who they are. And now I want to go and I want to make, I want to try and, I want to try to court them. I want to go on a date with them. Well, I know exactly how to talk to them. I know how to be as fake as all hell to get them to like me, right? Like now you got dating profiles like, hey, you got this person and this person. Are they a good match or not? Well, the AI system will know right away, because they know how you're going to react in all these situations. I mean, it's going to be so crazy what's possible out there. So now what I'm thinking is, I've always kept my online profile very clean. Like if you look at my first name and last name, you're only really going to find what I want you to see about me online. The problem is now they can predict how you're going to behave. They can predict what you're going to do just from what you said and other situations. So now I'm thinking we got to start some type of personal AI poisoning campaign where you put out a ton of information of audio of yourself to kind of poison that data log, to say like, oh, look, here's me acting like a super crazy person. Here's me acting like a high-end scientist, a scholar person. Here's me talking about how much I love professional wrestling and it's the time of my life, even though I don't. Here's, like basically just put out as much information you can that's so fake and so not how you would react in situations. So therefore, anyone that is grabbing all this information and correlating it all to do something like this, their models will be so messed up that they won't match that well. I never thought I would have to ever even think like this, but this is crazy. This is where the world's going. And this is just another thing in the whole world of AI where like, this is so cool, but oh my God, this is so terrifying. It's the whole, like, with great power comes great responsibility. So yeah, they're doing something really awesome. I'm sure they're being super responsible about it. Obviously they're disclosing everything, putting all the code out there, very in-depth reports about how they did everything. So no questions about that. But just this paper coming out puts that idea into someone else's head and goes, oh, I got an idea. I'm going to put marketing on its ass. I'm going to come up with the best way possible to market any demographic. Like, you want to put a billboard up in a place, all I got to do is interview everyone that's coming around that walks around that billboard to find out who's there. And then I'll find out who their personas are. I'm just going to contact some company that's already mined everybody. So I'm just going to put a camera out in front of somewhere where I want to have an ad. I'm going to collect faces for the next week or so to see who walks by there and every day and night and whatever. And then I'm going to send that off to this company, and that company's going to be like, okay, cool. So from this time to this time, you have these people, like, they're going to work, and here's all the demographics, here's their personas, and here's how they would behave. So if you wanted to buy an ad for an hour in Times Square, let's say, on a billboard, you could say, okay, well, the best hour for you is from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. because everyone that goes through there, and we ran through the simulations of everyone that goes through there, these people will absolutely buy your stuff. You have like a 50% click-through ratio or something if you make an ad like this and you target to these people, because we know how they're going to behave. And that's just the beginning. I mean, you can probably think of all kinds of crazy stuff, but it's going to be nuts. And as you know, whenever stuff is going to be nuts, I want to be on the inside as much as possible. So that's why over Thanksgiving break, I'm going to try to replicate this as much as possible. I really want to play and see the intricacies of this. I really want to know the details of what's going on, kind of like how I replicated the meta glasses hack, to really see what's involved. Because like when you see the hack, or when you see, and this isn't really a hack, but when you see the paper and you see what's come out, it's like they always show you all the good stuff. They might talk about things that didn't work, but you really don't know what works, what the limitations are, until you actually get your hands on and start playing with it. So that's what I really want to do. I want to get my hands on it. I want to start playing with it. I want to start figuring this thing out, seeing how this thing could be extrapolated out. I mean, just think of this from like an identity management standpoint. If you're thinking like, hey, we want to do risk mitigation, there's whole companies out there that their whole thing is to prevent risk and do risk scoring, where it's like, hey, this person is logging in, it pipes that all the information that comes from that to this risk engine and says, hey, what's the risk score? It gives it like a 1 to 5, let's say. And it comes back and goes, oh, well, this is a 1. Okay, cool. Let them in with just username and password. Oh, it's a 5. Don't let them in at all. Oh, it's a 3. Okay, let them in, but prompt them with MFA and make sure they really are who they are because of, it's a higher risk score. Well, now you can say, hey, look, here's this person coming in. We know exactly who this person is based on that persona. It goes to this AI model. The AI model says, hey, does this person really behave like this? Would they really do this stuff? Bam, you have the whole risk score. So like things like that can be used for all kinds of really good security practices. So that's why I think that using this generative agents idea, this cool, awesome Sims game that they've built out with real people actually behaving stuff, could be used in the real world right now. Like there's no reason this couldn't be implemented now other than costs and efficiency. So that's why I really want to see what's involved in here. I really want to get my hands on this stuff. And honestly, if I really can, I'd love to be able to talk to any of the people that built this thing out, because this is awesome. This is... They didn't just like test one little thing, they built a whole world, and they went way farther than I thought anyone would at this point. So this is pretty impressive. If you're interested in stuff like this too, and you might be doing something similar, let me know. I'm always looking for the latest and greatest stuff in AI. It's obviously blowing up everywhere, so we can't keep track of it all. So if you know any more information about this, or you know some cool tips and tricks, or if people have already been modding it or something like that, I'd love to know information about that. If you have any questions that I could possibly answer for you as well, feel free to hit me up anytime, adam@nidus.com. You can also check us out on all the social media profile stuff at NidusIAM. In the meantime, stay safe and better start getting yourself out there being not you for a while. Later. Nidus has just created the first iOS app made exclusively for identity management professionals. It's called Nidus Breachcast, and you can download it now. It's amazing. We have real-time updates of all the latest breaches that are occurring, CVEs as they come out real-time, really pertaining just to identity management. We have media that's going on this podcast. We're going to be bringing in a lot more others as well. And we even have a complete vendor list of all the identity management vendors and all their products, so you can find out exactly where to download their software, all the documentation. And what's even more awesome is an identity management glossary. All those crazy words and acronyms that we can never remember, they're all listed in there for you. No ads, just pure information to make your life simple.